Difficult Realities is an Elite City Media podcast. If you're interested in more information, make sure you follow us on Twitter at DifficultPod. Subscribe to our official YouTube channel, and keep your eyes open wherever you listen to podcasts for more episodes. No matter what you're listening on, make sure you turn on notifications so you always know when a new episode is posted. And most importantly, remember that while this is an opinion-based podcast, it is also backed up by evidence and facts. Or in other words, this podcast is Difficult Realities. Good afternoon, morning, or evening, whatever time it is that you've stumbled into Difficult Realities this week. Joining me alongside, as always, to my left is the wonderful Spittin'.
How you doing, guys?
Who has actually garnered a lot of attention for himself recently, both positive and negative. And to my right is the massive Yeti. Yeti, how you doing?
Doing fantastic today. Hope you guys are well.
Oh, I'm definitely well, and the podcast has been doing pretty well. For those of you who have not heard or have not seen our Twitter feed, we are now available in a lot of new places. We were recently approved for iHeartRadio, Google Podcast, and Amazon as well, so you can now get us on all those locations. I am waiting to hear back from Pandora. We may be on Pandora soon, but their review process can take up to 2 or 3 weeks, so they're just hard to get through to.
Some guy in his basement.
Yeah, really, it might be. It's Tom from MySpace. That's what he does now. I am hesitant. I'm waiting to put us on Apple. And the reason I'm waiting to put us on Apple is because I am waiting to see the fallout from this Apple Spygate technology. We actually talk about that quite a bit in a previous episode, on episode 3, as a matter of fact. So if you want to hear more on that, check out episode 3 of our podcast after you finish listening to this one. But I want to see what's going on with that before I put us on that platform, because it feels sort of hypocritical of me to do a whole episode about how Apple's technology is potentially predatory and then be like, by the way, listen to us on Apple's technology. So I just want to try to be as logically and honestly consistent as possible. And that is why today we've decided to talk about the issue that we've had chosen today, because this is one of those topics that requires a lot of logical honesty and consistency. I know that everybody is sick to death of talking about COVID, and I know that everybody's sick to death about talking about vaccines, but given that the world has had some developments over the last couple of days and weeks, it seems like an appropriate time, much like last week we talked about Afghanistan, it seems like an appropriate time to talk about COVID vaccines and Delta variants and all of that sort of stuff. So we recognize here at Difficult Realities that this issue is sensitive. We recognize that there are going to be people all over the world who have varying experiences with both catching the disease or family members catching the disease, and as well, people who have very varying experiences with getting vaccinated and experiencing the vaccines and all of the things that come with it. So we want to start off this episode today with a slight preamble, because we feel it is necessary to be transparent and to be open and to be honest, because today's podcast will feature a little bit of devil's advocacy, and I don't want to trip up any of our viewers into thinking we hold positions we don't hold. So we wanted to start this out today by explicitly announcing our positions on the vaccine and the science behind the vaccine. And I'm going to give all 3 of us a chance to do that, and I'll start so that our audience understands exactly where we stand. And if they want to come at us with arguments about you're crazy, you're a psycho, you don't believe in whatever, that they actually have a genuine starting point to build a legitimate argument that is not a straw man, that is not ad hominem, that is not any of the logical fallacies that people stumble into sometimes when you get into these conversations. So to start off, I will say this. I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, an anti-vaxxer. I have all of my vaccines from childhood. I have the COVID vaccine. I got the Moderna back in April. My mother and my whole family has the COVID vaccine. The first chance that I got to get the COVID vaccine, I took it without hesitation because I don't believe it's an intentionally harmful, microchipping, blood poison, what have you. I don't think it's the government attempting to thin the herd because I think there's much more profit in people being alive for the big pharmaceutical companies than there is for people being dead. I think it's nonsense to talk about this idea that the vaccine is designed to thin the herd because it doesn't make fiscal sense, and everything comes back to money in some capacity. I have no trouble with anybody out there saying, I'm going to go get vaccinated. I'm going to go get vaccinated. I agree with you, man. I think you should. I think it might not be the most efficacious vaccine we have. It might not be the most efficient one that we have, or the most tested or well proven one that we have. But any of the potential long-term effects, I don't think are going to be things that will be experienced in mass. I think it'll come at a more individual basis, and I think you as a society, as individuals, will have to deal with that as the time comes. But I don't believe we're headed for some I Am Legend sort of like, this is going to save the world and then we all become zombies in a couple of years. Nothing like that, in my opinion, is going to transpire from this. I think the science is largely good. I think the potential for mRNA vaccines in the future is a tremendous thing that needs to be talked about. And I think that the intentions of all of these companies that make vaccines are at some level noble and good. But I respect the opposition view to an extent that says, hey, a lot of these companies get to dodge liability. They wanted to privatize it. They didn't want to distribute it across the world. They wanted to profit from it. The people who created it have private stocks that they're making bank off of. This vaccine's been out for like 5 months now. It was supposed to be 2 years away, and it came out 3 months after the announcement that it was 2 years away. So did they go through the proper testing? Did they go through the proper whatever? Like, I just want to see the peer-reviewed studies. I think that is a completely legitimate perspective for somebody to hold. To say, hey, I just want to wait and see what happens. And I understand that when it comes to the human body and bodily autonomy, and also having to deal with a massively infectory virus that reaches people at a catastrophic level very quickly and can have disastrous consequences, that this conversation raise up like a puddle of mud. So I am prepared to have conversations with people from many different perspectives about this topic, because I believe this is one of the few times where if you are against this vaccine or for this vaccine, you have a compelling argument that's worthy of discussion. So that is my position with this current situation, and I want to give you two the opportunity to either mirror that or challenge that as you will. And we'll start with Spittin. I want to get Spittin's perspective and what he thinks on this particular issue.
Yeah. I too have the vaccine, took the vaccine. I got Pfizer, and I also got mine in late March, and then the second one I got in April. And it was kind of like when it became first available to us, I went and got it. Like my parents, they really wanted me to get it, and I spent a lot of time with them. And my kid at the time was 10, and he couldn't get one, so they talked me into putting aside my skepticism and just going in to get it. Now, as far as the thinning of the herd argument goes, I'm a little bit different, where I see it like just because Bill Gates, one time he straight up said at the World Economic Forum that we have 6.8 billion people, and before long we'll be going up to 9 billion, and with successful vaccines we ought to be able to take that down about 10 to 15%. Now, there's a clip of him saying that online, and you could say it was a slip of the tongue. I don't know what else he could have meant by it. He's definitely not trying to add people, but I think that the way that this has played out has shown, like, as far as I am familiar with, like, pandemics, they don't discriminate uh, between rich people, poor people, old people. But for some reason, everybody almost that has died from this has been old and poor. And I when people question me about that on Twitter, I just, all I can say is, please, I want to be wrong about this. Please cite me an instance where somebody other than Herman Cain, who was 74, but please tell me somebody that was 75 or younger that comes from affluent means, a actor, a musician, a billionaire. Just please tell me somebody that has died from this thing that was rich and then young and healthy. And because that's the way I think of pandemics, like this thing's going to run through the population, and it has no it doesn't care of your social status, it doesn't care if you're young or old. It's going to take you out if it gets a hold of you. And so the more that I see the Obamas having 400-person birthday parties indoors with no masks, and the more I see of this Nancy Pelosi fundraiser, it's just a bunch of old rich white people, looks like the cast of Get Out, all just sitting there with no masks on, all just having the best time of their life, while the help is walking around with masks on. It's kind of like I'm just really getting that vibe, man, that this thing is definitely deadly. I'm not denying that, but it's almost like the rich have their steroid cocktails that they take when they get it. You like Trump, for instance. He goes in and everybody's like, "Oh my God, he's dying." He comes out, he's fine. Anybody that has gotten it that was like him has just gotten over it. Like they keep saying this Governor Greg Abbott of Texas. Oh my God, he's against vaccine mandates, but he's got COVID now. And it's like, yeah, but he's fully vaxxed. He's got a breakthrough case of COVID. And he's doing daily interviews and shit from his house in quarantine and exhibiting no symptoms, and it's like, I don't know. I like I've said before in previous episodes that I'm a conspiracy theorist at heart, so maybe that goes along with the territory in this, but something to me just something ain't right. And we'll get into it later on about all the efficacy issues I have and stuff like that. But that's where I stand. I've got my vax. My whole family's got their vax. Except my kid, because he's just now 11. And I'm not telling anybody not to go out and get one. It's just, I'm just skeptical of the powers that be just seeming like they can, they're immune to it.
Which I think is a completely fair point, honestly.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, with that being said, I'll hand it over to you, Yeti. But wait, real quick, Yeti. Since you're Canadian, I heard Trudeau. He gave a presser the other day, and I haven't asked you yet. I wanted to see if you heard it, where he straight up said that if you don't have a legitimate health reason not to get the vaccine, then you better get it, or there will be repercussions. Did you hear that?
No, I didn't hear. I try to avoid Canadian politics because it's just mind-numbingly bad.
Okay, but yeah,
Yeah, he's a very much an elitist. Like his dad was the prime minister of Canada in the 70s.
yeah,
He grew up in like unbelievable wealth and privilege. He's just tone dead, and he knows he can get away with it because he has a pretty face. So he'll threaten, and then all the news will cover for him. So
yeah. I just didn't know if you had heard that, but there's a clip of it floating around somewhere because I saw it, so it's got to be out there. And yeah, so
I seen him today comparing Nazis and communism. I was like, did you not read up on the World War II? It was the communists fighting the Nazis. Like,
yeah,
fuck.
he just seems like a real asshole. But yeah, so I'll just hand it over to you, and you can explain what you're going through and all that, buddy.
Yeah. So I'm pro-vaccine. I think vaccines work. I don't understand the science completely behind it, but I understand enough to read it and understand the basics of it. So, and with my history, I've been a heart transplant patient since I was 14 years old. So I'm 38 now. Oh man, I'm almost 40. God damn. And so I've been in and out of medical clinics, hospitals for the majority of my life. So I talk with doctors, I talk with nurses, I talk with all sorts of medical professionals. My wife is also a registered nurse. So through all this, I have built a trust in those doctors. So when they've told me it was in my best interest to do this, I was like, okay, fine. I will take your guys' word at it. Because these people have kept me alive, seemingly against my own will at times, for this majority of my life now. So, and I've always stipulated that if you want to test something on someone, I'll go in. Because I'm like, there ain't been nothing that killed me yet, so I'll keep going. I'm like the Energizer Bunny, but bigger and scarier. I just keep going. And so from just my time, like in dealing with this kind of stuff, I've just learned to trust my medical family, essentially. Right? So to me, it makes sense. And I think the effectiveness in vaccines over time have shown that they're reliable, but also the caveat is over time. Like we're only a year, not even a year into this vaccine. So if people have legitimate concerns about the long-term effects, then I don't think you have any right to tell them they shouldn't be able to do that. Because as history has shown us with government, they often do not always have our best interests at heart. So I don't think it's unreasonable for people to be skeptic, like you guys said, right? But I will also say I'm pro-vaccine. If you feel like you should get the vaccine, get the vaccine. There's always going to be side effects with anything in our lives. I didn't have any side effects. My wife felt pretty shitty for a few days after her vaccines. She had Pfizer, I had Moderna. So I've kind of seen both of the more out there ones from my personal perspective. But it's a small perspective because I don't leave my house. So, and I think that's all I really have to say to start.
Right.
I think we'll get into it a little more.
Right. All right. So that is an introduction. And that was important because now for the rest of this episode, when we talk about stuff, you know, in good faith, where our opinions are coming from, because we are going to get into some of the more controversial topics on this. One of the big things we wanted to discuss, and I don't know if we want to start here because it is probably the most interesting thing, but I also don't necessarily want to put off the conversation because it is the most, I think it's the most topical. People have been discussing that now with FDA approval for Pfizer, it was Pfizer, correct?
Yes.
Whether or not a vaccine mandate is in order. And I want to start with this FDA approval business because it's a strange badge that people have been putting on this, that that FDA approval is the magic wand waving as to whether or not we think something's in good faith. FDA is not a science-based organization. It's a government-based organization. It is the Food and Drug Administration, and their claimed job is to ensure that the food and drugs that we put into our body are safe and effective, which sounds like it would be rooted in a scientific nature. But we all know for a fact that the FDA has allowed some crazy shit through before.
Yeah.
And one of the examples I like to go to, other than Flint, Michigan, being a pretty staunch one for their water, the EPA and the FDA have both turned a blind eye to the amount of lead in Flint, Michigan's water for a long time. Never mind that it's a largely minority populace out there. Do you guys know about the Kids Eat Well program? I believe it's called Kids Eat Well.
I've heard of the program. Yeah.
I'm gonna look it up real quick. Well, basically,
sorry.
Oh,
To your FDA point. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Spin.
yeah, go ahead. While I look this up, go ahead.
I was just gonna say while you're looking it up, and also like for the FDA thing, people just think since that's stamped on there that it's good, and I just want to point out that the FDA allows a certain amount of arsenic to be in baby formula and a certain amount of plastics to be in your meat.
Right.
So like whenever you see a meat recall and they're like due to plastics, it's just contaminants, it's just too many that the FDA allows. I mean, so it's like you were saying with Flint, there's it, and it being a government agency, you know, that like I want people to understand that just because the FDA says that this thing's all good, let's also point out that Pfizer is a company that makes Chantix, the smoking medicine to get you to quit smoking. They just had to shelf it because it had a large amount of carcinogens in it. And that is also, Pfizer is also the company that sold Zantac, the heartburn medicine, which, if you remember a couple of years ago, they had to pull it because it had cancer-causing materials in it. And I took that shit every day for 12 years.
Yep.
You know,
the other thing with Champex, the other thing with Champex is it also fucked a lot of people's mental stuff around too.
I remember hearing about that.
Yeah, they had to start including that on their advertisements that may cause paranoid schizophrenia. You know, so
does the FDA also do like
FDA approve those things?
Does the FDA also do the approval for like interior replacement parts of the body?
Oh, like surgical replacements?
Yeah.
I would not know.
I'm on their website right now, so I'll take a look while you guys are finishing up your point.
Because if they do, I have a story. If not,
okay.
I don't.
That's interesting. Well, I mean, it's different up in Canada, isn't it? It's
no, this is an American topic.
Oh, this is an American
from a show
story.
I watched.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not seeing anything about surgery, but their website is archaic to look at. I'm looking at it right now, and it is absolutely archaic. I mean,
I'm
like
pretty sure it
it
was the
looks like it's from
FDA that
2008.
approved it.
Okay.
But at one point they were using the wrong metal in
Ooh.
some of the replacement bones, like
Okay.
the hip replacements. So people ended up getting infected by it. So they had like thousands of these people that like their legs just got entirely fucked up.
I remember that with knee replacements and hip replacements.
Yeah, and so one of the part of the process is you can almost piggyback off another product if it's similar enough.
Mm-hmm.
But you can still have differences and it will get fast tracked, which is what I believe happened with this certain replacement.
The only thing I
It
can
was
see them
some kind of titanium.
the only thing I can see them advertising on their website is like surgical equipment like masks and gloves and things like that. I don't see anything about replacement body parts, so I'll have to take a deeper dive into that when I get some free time. But to go
I'll
back
look it up too.
to go back to why I brought this whole point up, it was the Academy of Nutritionists, which works necessarily due to its byproduct with the FDA, created a brand that they started putting on food labels a few years ago called Kids Eat Right. And the concept was that they would be able to go through and identify foods that were of a certain, nutritional value and be able to stick this label on there so that parents could go to the stores and know that if this label is on this food product, your child should be able to eat this and it will help them grow and develop and maintain a slightly or healthy lifestyle. So that would be a way for parents to sort of start to vet what their children were eating. The problem was that this logo ended up on Kraft singles. You guys know what Kraft singles are, right?
Yeah, the fake cheese.
Yeah. Do you know why they're called singles?
No.
Because the FDA and other government agencies will not legally allow Kraft to call that cheese. Because it is a chemical creation, it does not contain very much natural product at all. It is almost completely chemically created.
Explains why they make the best grilled cheese, though.
They're not legally allowed to call it cheese.
Well, that explains why it can sit in my crisper in the refrigerator for 6 years, and I have no problem opening it up and putting it on a grilled cheese.
Oh yeah.
No mold, nothing. I mean, it doesn't go bad. Hey.
Yeah.
That's like the McDonald's food when you can put a Big Mac under a self-contained system and it'll just like stay a Big Mac for basically ever.
So here's the question. How does it explain how this Kids Eat Right logo ended up on Kraft singles? Do we know the answer?
Kraft paid them some money.
That would be correct. That would be correct. The Kraft paid the Academy of Nutritionists a significant amount of money in a donation to be allowed to put this logo on their cheese. Cheese in quotes. You can go right to the Academy of Nutritionists and Dietetics, and find all of this information. Now the donation will not be public, but you can read all about Kids Eat Right if you want and read all about Kraft singles, but there will be a link from the Heritage Victory Valley Medical Group website talking about what I'm talking about right now. And the reason
the FDA has lobbyists.
Essentially, yes, the FDA does have lobbyists, and it has people who lobby on its behalf.
Is this also when they took all the vending machines out and put in more nutritional food?
I mean, there was
more money.
There was a whole window of time in the 2010s when that sort of thing was happening on and off. I mean, that was around the time that our FDA decided to mark pizza as a vegetable so that it would meet so that our school lunches would meet nutritional values.
It's a square meal. It's got bread, milk,
literally,
fruit, veggies.
Yeah. So, I mean, The reason I bring this up is because we have to remember that the FDA is not like Bill Nye and his group of elite scientists going to the government and saying, now listen, if you don't do this thing, the planet will die. The FDA is a government-based organization who follows all the same laws and regulations that other government agencies do, who by proxy work to remove some of the restrictions put upon them when they're able to. Yes, they have lobbyists. Yes, they try to break rules and regulation requirements. Yes, they have sketchy pasts about letting certain things into food and into medicine. And unfortunately, that history opens the door for these people who are anti-vaxxers, who say things about like, well, if they're going to have lead in water and chemicals in our medicine, why wouldn't they have mercury in our vaccines? So it gives these ridiculous people a legitimate platform to stand on. But larger than that is it creates reasonable skepticism about, hey, if you're willing to cut the corner on what I eat, and if you're willing to cut the corner on other medicines I put in my body, are you willing to cut the corner on this pandemic-based vaccine that may be mandated into my body soon? So where I look at it is I don't see the FDA approval as enough of a scientific consensus to justify a national mandate for this vaccine.
Yeah, I agree.
What I would be looking for specifically would be, and these might exist. I want to specify that this stuff might exist and I may have not seen it, but I would like to see peer-reviewed scientific journals and documentations regarding the vaccine. I want to see retests of the materials involved, recreations of the experiments, right? That's necessary for peer review. And I would like to be able to follow that paper trail. If that stuff exists, I am more than happy to look at it because it's what I want to see to justify it. But as I know right now, that stuff is still in process because retesting vaccine creation and the science behind vaccine takes a long fucking time to do.
Oh, I can imagine. Well, that's kind of why I want to see the long term kind of start to come around too.
And unfortunately, we all have to wait for that because
like there's no fast track.
We're the test subjects.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I hate to say it like that because it feeds the like the anti-vax conspiracy.
What else would you call it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to. That's what I'm saying. I hate to put it like that, but it is. The way I'll say it is there's an element of truth in that idea that we are kind of wait and see what happens to people. There is definitely an element of truth. Now, again,
can I just say that maybe our audience doesn't know. First of all, the FDA approval is for 16 and over.
Mm-hmm.
It's
not for children.
The 12 to 16 weren't covered, and anything other under 12 still aren't able to take it. Now, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, that's important. That's very important.
But what were we just talking about?
The mandates and the scientific peer review and being tested.
Yes. Okay. And the other thing that our audience might not know is that the quickest a vaccine was ever made and given to the public was 4 years before this. Okay, 4 years, and generally it takes 10 to 15 years to do the proper research like you're talking about, the animal studies, all this stuff, okay, that goes into assuring the public that this thing is safe. Now, this thing, Pfizer's is boasted about being made in a couple of hours by the BioNTech guys, and who happens to be a billionaire. And then the Moderna is boasted by that company as having made their coronavirus vaccine in 2 days. Yeah. Now, I get pushback about the mRNA it already being a 10-year-old product or whatever. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the COVID vaccine.
The specifics, yes.
Yeah, uh, because we're not just taking that shot, that mRNA shot. We're supposed to be taking something that is different. So you can't just say, well, they already had this thing before, and it's like I don't care about the thing before. I don't care what they combined it with. This is a new product, and it was, uh, made in a couple days, and it was rushed to market within 9 months. And
Right.
like I said before, the previous record for a vaccine was 4 years.
Right.
That was the earliest. Okay, so I
Now,
wanted to get that
yeah.
out there.
Now, I would respond to that with a couple things. I would say that I don't want to say that just because this is unusual how fast it happened doesn't necessarily mean that it's not possible, that it's, that could happen, that somebody who's a scientific mind couldn't have a eureka moment and put something together that is legitimate and valid. I don't want to say that that's impossible just because it's never happened before.
Yes.
There's always a never happened before for things until it happens, and then all of a sudden, if somebody has a eureka moment and comes up with something that can radically change the amount of time it takes to produce legitimate, valid vaccines, I want to make sure that that possibility remains open, and I'm not ruling that out on the mere principle that it's never happened before or that it's unusual. However, that I'm also not suggesting that that's what happened, right?
Yes,
I'm
and
not. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I also want to say that that previous record of 4 years, I may be wrong here, but I think it was 1975. So medicine has advanced
Quite a bit.
since then. In almost 50 years.
And we haven't really seen a need for too many new vaccines. We've just really kind of seen improvements on pre-existing ones since then. So this is kind of a strange situation that we're in because we have never needed one this fast before. So it may have always.
The closest one is the H1N1, but that was just a variation.
And that was so niche, that wasn't like what H1N1 was nothing like what we're looking at now.
No, not even
close. So there's really never been a modern precedent for this situation. And it stands to reason that it is entirely possible that a vaccine could have been produced this fast and that the advances in science have been such that we are capable of whipping shit out. Just because it's never happened before doesn't mean it isn't quality. But again, I would say the flip side is I'm not sure that that's what happened here. I think it is equally possible that people with decent or even average intentions or good intentions, but whatever the case may be, had significant pressure from the federal government, from the FDA, from both administrations of the past couple of years. I think they had a tremendous pressure on them and may have cut some small corners that professionals in the field know you can kind of get away with if you pay the right people or do the right thing or whatever the case might be, and maybe put out something that, had we taken another 6 months even, may have taken the efficacy from 42% up to 75%, which I think people would agree would be a significant difference in efficacy. I think people who are out there who are hesitant because, and we'll talk more about this in depth, so we're not just going to throw numbers at you and then run away from it, but I think there's a lot of people out there who see Pfizer's, 42% efficacy last time they did a measurement on it?
Yep. 42
it was 42
for Pfizer.
It was 42 for Pfizer in July.
Yeah.
But they're saying that, they're also saying that it's losing 6% efficacy
over time,
every month or 2 months.
Mm-hmm. So I think
it could be down to 30% by the time the booster shots start rolling out.
And I think it's very possible to say that people who see that information and are going, hey, if this shit isn't even working, why am I taking it? Might have a different tone if the efficacy was up in the 70s or 80s. Because now you're saying, okay, there's a 1 in 4 chance that this doesn't work for me, where as opposed to there's almost a 3 in 4 chance it doesn't work. I think that's a huge difference for some people. So I think that's probably more likely what happened, is that it's a combination of, yes, we can produce vaccines much faster than we used to be able to do it. However, we were still rushing this one. And as a result, its ability to do what it's supposed to do suffered. I think that's a perfectly fair conclusion for somebody to come to. And I think if you come to that conclusion on either side of the fence, whether it might not be great, but I'm going to get it because it's better than nothing, or because my family is, vulnerable, or whatever the case, or somebody to say it's not really great, so I don't see a point, like it's not going to change. I could still get a breakthrough case, like even if it reduces it, like I'm 28 years old. Like I see both sides of that, and I think either one is a reasonable conclusion to come to when you come to that conclusion.
I'd also like to state those numbers are from the Mayo Clinic. And the analytics was done by inference.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's a small hospital.
Can you send me that source information in our group chat so I can include it?
Right now?
Soon. Just, whenever.
Yeah. And for anybody listening, it's up all over. All you have to do is Google Pfizer 42 effective.
Right.
That's all you got to do.
I just want to make it right there for people to have.
No, I get it. I'm just telling them. And and also I'm calling it down the middle, man. Yes, it is the Mayo Clinic, like Yeti said, but also it wasn't yet peer reviewed at the time of publication. Yes. And but this was July, and but on Monday, last Monday, I was watching the coronavirus task force, or whatever they're called, do their weekly briefing or whatever, and Fauci and whatever her name is, they acknowledged it and said that yes, that is what's happening because of Delta, and it's all the more reason for us to get boosters is right. what they're saying now, but I just don't. We'll get into that later.
And I do want to this seems like as good a time as any to talk about boosters for a moment. And I want to stress, because we probably should have said this at the top, but it's also sort of like self-explanatory. None of us are scientists, and none of us are vaccine experts or biological experts by any stretch of the imagination. We are all laymen. We understand that. We respect that. We're working with the information we have. All right. So if a scientific expert comes to me and says it is in your best interest to take a booster, I am open to that possibility. If they come out and they say, because for the same reasons we're talking about, maybe it was rushed, but the intentions are good, and we're just kind of working our way through this situation, and there's going to be some roadblocks, and this is an unprecedented situation that we are figuring out together as a society for the first time. I can respect that as a potential reality of what's going on. So if I'm like me, and I don't believe that the vaccine is an intentional way to kill me or control me or sedate me or whatever the case, and they come and they say, hey, look, if you got the Pfizer vaccine, it's a good idea to take this booster 6 months from now. All right, I'll hear you out. Give me your case. If you took the Moderna, you're a little bit better off. It's kind of optional if you want the booster or not. All right, I'm listening to you. I'll hear you out. But I also understand why people, again, are saying, hey, this efficacy is so low. How do I even know that this booster is going to boost the efficacy? Is it actually legitimately a booster, or is it just bullshit? Are you just making stuff up to cover your ass? You don't want that
false sense of security.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is a legitimate fear too, is people are, it's kind of true, especially amongst the left, that people who get the vaccine are going so far back to normal life that they're almost acting like it's not even out there anymore. Like it can't even get you anymore.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's a little bit disappointing in a sense, because I see a lot of people out there who are still putting on good practices. If they go into very densely crowded places, they're wearing masks, which, for the record, I am not anti-mask. I believe they're surgeons have worn masks for the entire time that surgery has been a modern practice. Like, it's not nothing, right? I think, and if it was nothing, I'd be willing to put it on just to make people comfortable, because I'm that kind of guy. Like, it doesn't bother me.
because I've looked up this too about the surgeon
Yeah,
masks,
they are different.
and whether they prevent the spread of
Yeah.
viruses. Okay, they are not have never claimed to be 100% or even close to
No,
that effective in doing that. What they're mainly wearing those masks for is to keep blood splatter out of their mouth from the
which
person they're
is
operating on.
which is fine too. But I'm
And I'm
also
not
yeah.
anti-mask either. You know
Yeah,
what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I just want to put that
the
out there.
oh, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The masks are pretty simple. All it does is keep you from, if you get sick, like any of your contaminants kind of spreading out on something.
Right.
Like if you're in a
yeah.
store and you say something and your spit lands on the Del Monte pineapple or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. And like I've always sort of liked that meme about the dude pissing himself. Like if you're wearing pants, your pee won't go all over the place. It's not like nobody's out here like looking for 100% foolproof method. The only 100% foolproof method of stopping this thing is to literally isolate every single person for a month. And I'm talking about even within a household. And that's completely unreasonable. Like we're talking about is reduction. When we're talking about masks, all we've ever been talking about is reduction. You're less likely to like you said, you're less likely to spit on somebody when you're talking. You're less likely to directly breathe on somebody when you're talking. You know, like it's always been about reduction. It's never been about complete prevention. So like I have no problem with that. And you know, we've sort of gone off track a little bit, and I sort of lost my point just a little bit on the masks thing, which is fine. But my larger and grandiose point was that I am okay with talking about this from a perspective of reduction and not elimination, because I recognize that when it comes to this sort of thing, not just like with cancer and with AIDS and with a bunch of other various like certain types of hepatitis and diabetes, there are not always cures for everything, but there are things you can do to reduce the side effects or the spread or whatever. You know what I mean? Like we pretend as a society sometimes that AIDS is sort of gone. It's not gone. We've just gotten so good at managing it that it feels like it's gone, but it's very much not gone. HIV and AIDS are still very much around, right?
Yeah,
Because
what it does is it attacks your immune system. So it's kind of like I don't have an immune system because I need to protect my heart.
Yeah.
It's the same idea. It's like if you get an illness, you're going to get a lot sicker quicker.
Yeah, so I'm okay. Like a lot of people, they frame this as if it's going to be smallpox or polio, where the vaccine might annihilate the virus, with the exception of people who don't get vaccinated. In the case like we're seeing with like malaria and measles and things like that, going through the anti-vax community. And I don't think that's a good faith way to talk about it. And I don't think people are doing it on purpose all the time. I think some people are because they're just like laymen and they're not educated on science and vaccine science and all this. But I think talking about it from a frame of reference of reduction is as valid as anything, because if you go to somebody and you say, here's the science, if we could get this to a place where getting the vaccine reduced it to 90%, you have a 90% chance that you will not get COVID. I think most people would take a 1 in 10 chance and go, and we'd sort of be able to go about it and maybe start treating COVID like the flu, where, okay, you got it, just stay home 3 or 4 days or whatever the science says, you know, by the time that we would have that quality of a vaccine ready. And I think people would be okay with that, knowing that COVID was just something you live with going forward and you might get it like you might get the flu, right? But we're not at that level yet. We're not even close to that level yet. COVID breakthrough cases are untracked right now because the Biden administration has stopped tracking them, as Spitton has pointed out several times on our show. Yeah, they stopped tracking them on May 1st. So we have no idea what the actual breakthrough COVID case numbers are. No idea whatsoever. And so to get back to the point that I remembered that I was trying to make, it's disappointing to me in a sense to see like people on the hard left going completely back to normal. I will not lie and pretend like I don't go into stores without a mask on sometimes, especially like a dollar store where I know there's 2 people in there. I'm going back. I've been back out to eat. Like a lot of the places where I live are open again. And I go out to eat. But I haven't been to any concerts or big people gatherings or anything like that because I'm not going to sit in front of 17,000 people and take a guess as to whether or not anybody there is actually smart enough to care about their own health and then by proxy mine. Like, I'm just not going to do that. You know what I mean? Not yet, anyway. I'm by the time a couple months goes by, maybe we have some advancement and I can reassess that. But so, as far as these boosters go, I'm not sure that the populace is even. They're so sick of this, and this is multi-perspective. This is the left. This is the right. This is the moderate. This is the radical. Whatever you want to say. People are so sick of this that they would rather pretend that it's over than actually address the situation. And I think that leads to a lot of bad faith arguments on this side as well. Because I think there's a handful of people out there arguing against the vaccine because their position is, I'm sick of hearing about this. I'm sick of talking about this. I just want to get back to my life. I don't care if I get sick or not, which I think is not a great, it's not an informed opinion.
No,
right?
It's understandable at this point because it's been almost so long, right?
Right.
And we're so good at fucking it up.
Yes, America is great at fucking it up. We are the top fuck it up country, I think, in the entire world.
But in the same
next
regard,
to the UK.
Australia,
and
and
U.S., India, and then Brazil.
Of course.
But in the same regard, Australia is supposed to be the shining example.
Yeah.
Because if they have 100 cases, they lock the fuck down.
Yeah.
But that is also what's the shit coming out of that country right now. That's not helpful either.
No.
I shared that story yesterday about the people killing the rescue dogs because
I was going to bring that up.
Coming to pick them up.
Yeah.
And then I also shared that video of the cops beating and macing the kids that weren't wearing the mask, all while one of the cops didn't have a mask on.
Yep.
That is some Third Reich shit.
Yeah, they have no conscience anymore. Cops just do whatever the hell they want, and the government just keeps letting them do it.
Yep.
Because it works for them.
Not wrong at all. So,
so with that being said, it's like, we're the kings of fucking it up. Us and India or whoever, we're the kings of fucking this up. But also when you look at the shining examples of like China and Australia, like in the beginning when China eradicated it, almost right from the start, they had they had it to where drones were flying around, and if they caught you outside, God only knows what happened to you. But you had to train your animals to use the bathroom inside the house.
Right.
You could not go outside of your home. Now, with that being said, they've almost eradicated the virus, but it's like, like in New Zealand right now, they had one case and they shut the motherfucker down. And now you got people saying, well, now it's turned into 100 reported cases. And it's like, but I want to know, man, how many of those people died? Because right now we just went over, I think, 38 million cases here in the States. Okay. But those cases never go away, man. It's like, tell me how many active cases we had. Don't keep adding it from last year. They never take those cases away. They don't take the cases away of the false positives. Show me active cases as compared to hospitalizations, as compared to deaths. Just be honest with me. Don't fearmonger me into being like, oh my God, 38 million people in the United States have COVID.
Right.
Because they don't. People have gotten over it. Some of those 38 million that we know of, 600 something thousand, are dead. Just be honest about the situation. Don't just say, look, okay, this is the deal. We've got X amount of cases right now. We've got this many happening a day. Of that many, this many are getting hospitalized. Of that many, these are the ones that need to be on ventilators. These are the ones that are dying. Just say it, because it doesn't fit their narrative. It doesn't fit their narrative, like on liberal media. It doesn't fit their narrative if like only 30 people are dying a day from it. But, oh my God, there were 200,000 cases reported yesterday, 30 deaths.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not trying to take anything away from those 30 deaths, but when you factor it in to how many cases are being reported, like I mean,
Well, I'll tell you this. I'll tell you this to add on to that. I do think it is good to report the cases versus death ratio, but I also think it's equally important to report the cases where somebody catching COVID is going to result in a lifelong health issue or to result in some sort of change in quality of life. Because I think people are a little black and white in looking at this and, well, it didn't kill me. And it probably, it's not killing people ages 18 to 35. It's not killing people under 50 or whatever the metric is. But is it changing your way of life? Is it causing somebody to have permanent lung damage? Is it causing somebody to have heart failure? Is it causing somebody to have a weakened immune system for a long-term effect? I think, and there might be HIPAA complications, but if you take the anonymity, you take the names out of it, and you're just talking about this is how many people had these experiences. You can even lump them all together. I don't need to know the exact specifics. I just want to know how many cases are long-term affecting health of people who catch it, because looking at it as, well, it's not going to kill me, is only so valid, because if it crushes one of your lungs and you need a ventilator or breathing assistance for the rest of your life and you're 25 years old, that's pretty significant. If it weakens, if it weakens your immune system,
I know of 2 people that had heart transplants from COVID. And my transplants from a virus.
Right. So don't you think it might be worth reporting that information as well? Because
it would.
I think it might make people, if you're really pro-vaccine and you believe, and we're going to get into mandates next, but if you really believe that everybody should have this, only reporting on will I live or die is not significant to me, because there are people out there who do shit every day on the premise of, well, it's not going to kill me, right? People go to, they go shooting, or they go racing, or they go, and like, I have been with girls where my girlfriend has texted me and been like, I'm sick. And I'm like, I don't care. I'll get sick for you. You're telling me that's not happening with COVID, right? Like, I'm not.
Oh, yeah.
I know how kids are, right? Like teenagers, they fall in love and that's all they can fucking think about. Hell, some adults are still like that. They fall in love and that becomes their only thought. So I know very well that people will ignore it if the only thing they get reported on is death. But if you introduce the information that, hey, this could change your life in a fucked up way, it might make even a few more people be more conscious and cautious. And I think that's worth acknowledging.
But okay, and it's also worth acknowledging, like, when I get in fights on Twitter, like, people will just be like, take the vax, don't ask any questions,
and that's dumb.
And then I'll be like, well, Singapore, 80% of all their new cases are of fully vaxxed people. Well, that's in Singapore, and they probably have a shit vaccine. And I say, no, they use Pfizer and Moderna, and then they're like, well, how many of those people are having to go to the hospital and are dying, because that's what's important. And so then I don't have those exact numbers, but then I'll throw out that in my state, as of last month, 170 people had died that were fully vaxxed, and there were currently 600 people in the hospital with COVID that were fully vaxxed. Now, that was last month, and that paper got in a lot of shit for reporting that, because they told the truth, and people don't like that nowadays. So I don't have any more up-to-date numbers to add to that. But when I do point out that 160 people died in a 2-month span between their second dose and dying, and that 600 people are hospitalized after they told me that won't happen. Yeah. They say, yeah, but it says here that Illinois has administered this many doses. And if you do the numbers, that is only 1% of the people are dying or being hospitalized. So then when I bring up that overall, the death rate of COVID is 99%. The survival rate is 99%. Holy shit! Then I'm just fucking crazy. Like, how could you even bring that up? And I'm like, you just fucking brought it. You know what I mean? So it's like it's like, okay, I get you being pro-vax, but Jesus Christ, look at it from, I mean, quit writing off these people's deaths just because it doesn't suit your narrative.
And that's a
You know what I
tactic.
mean?
Yeah, I was actually going to say that's a tactic that I've run into a lot in my day, and the most prominent place I've ever run into it was my discussion of religion, which we actually talked a little bit before we went on the show. And that's a tactic called counting the hits and ignoring the misses. And what that comes down to long term is it's the idea of when something happens that affirms your point, you acknowledge it. And when something happens that disaffirms your point, you chalk it up to some other factor. So you can see this in play in a lot of different places. One of the examples is when Trump won the election, liberals said that was Russia came in and hacked our shit, and there's, the election is not valid.
Mm-hmm.
And when Biden won, liberals said it's completely valid. You lost. Get over it. All right. That's an example of counting a hit, which is Biden won, and ignoring a miss, Trump won. And I'll give you an even more prominent example because this one will hit home for a lot of people, and it's a little controversial, but oh God, not at 50 minutes into a COVID podcast, right?
Dare you?
When I talk to religious people about this concept, it's usually in the context of prayer. People saying, okay, I prayed for my son's cancer to get better and it did. So therefore, that was God. And I flip that and I say, okay, what about all the people who pray for their children's cancer to go away and it doesn't? And they say, well, that's God's plan and we don't understand it. So you counted the hit of your son's cancer going away when you prayed, and you ignored the misses of when all those other kids didn't have their cancer go away. You wrote it off as something else.
Selfish ass shit.
That's
Well,
kind
normally
of
what they
what you're
do in
talking about.
religion
And I just want to be clear, I don't want to go too far off on that religion thing. We're going to do an episode on that. I brought that up largely to point out what counting the hits and ignoring the misses is.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. I've never heard that put that way before.
Yeah,
I like
and
it.
it's
I either.
Even wrote it down. Swerve.
Yeah, thank you. And
It's a good
Yeti, I
principle.
want to let you make the point you were going to make. I'm just making sure that we're not going to go off on a religious tangent today.
Oh no, it's not that big of a deal. Anyways, we'll just
Yeah.
keep going.
All right, if you're
I'll
sure.
save it
I
till
don't
later.
want to silence you, but and the other
Oh,
thing,
you're canceling me?
yeah, that's
How
right. I'm
dare you.
canceling you, Yeti.
You know what I wanted to
you're
bring up real
anti-vax.
quick?
Yeah,
I know we're several minutes removed from it, but
yeah.
whenever Yeti said, so you're not spitting all over the Del Monte
Yeah.
pineapple. I just wanted to, I was going to throw, which this podcast is being brought to you by Del Monte pineapples.
That was
The
my
only
first
pineapple
thought
that
too.
won't get spit on.
That was my first thought. I was like, I hope someone
Yeah.
sends me some Del Monte.
Yeah, dude. Let's take a pineapple sponsorship right now.
I thought that was funny.
The other thing that what those people are doing when they talk to you, to go back to the point, spitting, is I'm sure you've heard of this one. It's called moving the goalpost. All right.
Oh God. Yeah.
So your argument started. Let's say the argument was I have a basketball in my trunk. Okay, that's the argument. And Spittin says, well, no, you don't. Okay. I say, well, I open my trunk and there's a basketball in there. And Yeti says, okay, well, it's not an NBA official Wilson basketball. And I flip it over and it's, here's the Wilson logo. And this packaging suggests it's the same one that the NBA uses. And you go, okay, well, maybe in warm-ups, but it's not the ball they use in the game. Right? We've gotten so far away from the point that, yeah, I had the basketball in my trunk. That was the original argument. Now we're talking about the merits of the basketball, the material of the basketball, when it's effective to use and when it's not. And hey, we're talking about a basketball now, but what if it's a vaccine? Well,
That
we have the
basketball
vaccine.
was not used in an NBA game, so I
Right.
will not put up with this shit.
Yeah, exactly. But let's flip it over and make it about a vaccine. All right, Yeti, I have a COVID vaccine in my trunk. No, you don't. All right, I open it up and here's the vaccine. Okay, well, it's not effective. It's a Singapore vaccine, so it's not as effective over there. Well, it's the same one that I actually bought this from the Walmart down the street here in the United States. Well, okay, but the doctors who administer that vaccine in Singapore They're not as qualified as American doctors, so they're administering it poorly, so it's skewing the results. All right, well, the Health Consensus Bureau and the CDC are global programs, and all of this stuff sort of goes, it's all universal. And they'll keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it because, and this is something that, to be fair, I have seen from every political perspective. I've seen it from leftists, from liberals, from moderates, from conservatives, from Tea Party people. I have seen it from everybody. And because
I've done it myself.
moving the goalposts is directly related to cognitive bias. It really sucks from a certain perspective to get proven wrong about something. There are studies that suggest that being proven wrong triggers the same area of the brain as pain does. So people will adamantly avoid it. Me, on the other hand, it sucks, but I'm happy when it happens because now I have new information to play with. So I like that. And if anybody has anything that's contradicted this podcast to this point, by all means, hit me with it. And
like I said, I want to be proven wrong.
Yeah.
I just love learning new information.
In the same way that I talked about counting the hits and ignoring the misses was something I talked about in religion. One of the concepts that I used to put out on my religious show that I did back in the day, The Mind of an Atheist, which unfortunately there's like minimal archives of, is we said, I want to believe as many true things as possible and as few false things as possible. And that's the root core of skepticism. Right? I want to believe as many true things as I can and as few false things as I can because my life will be better informed if I follow that practice. So I'm always out looking for things that will challenge me, that will conflict with me. And then if I can, and not just arguing, because a lot of people think they can argue their way out of a paper bag, and what they really do is they straw man their way out of it. But not just can I argue a point or can I regurgitate a talking point that somebody above me said or that I heard on the news or whatever. If you take information that you take in and compare it to the information that you are able to reproduce about a topic, and you come to the same conclusion that you had before, there's a good chance that you were right. Not a foolproof chance, but a good chance. If you cannot, either you might be wrong or you were not informed enough about your original opinion and you need to go back and check it. And that's something that this particular topic is going to have a lot of people that are going to have to do from all different perspectives because it's far more complicated than, say, a conversation about abortion or a conversation about gay rights. Those are very easy conversations because abortion is purely a bodily autonomy conversation and gay rights is just an ethics conversation, and you're a piece of shit if you don't, like, you know what I mean? Like, if you oppose gay people, like, in 2021, what the fuck are you doing? So like those are very
we
easy.
Want equality for all. But what about these? All. I said all.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like, those are very easy conversations. This is much more complicated. And I wanted to talk for a second about argumentation and some of the bad arguments, because the next thing we're going to talk about is perhaps the most controversial part of this, and that is the mandate. Mm-hmm. So the big topic right now is whether or not the government should or has a right to introduce and institute a mandate on this vaccine. And I would guess, and I don't know for sure, that's why we're doing the show, but I would guess that we probably have very similar opinions on this. But that's kind of boring. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to play a little game with the two of you in any capacity here, where I'm going to play some devil's advocate, because I have argued against all sorts of different government mandates, and I've heard all sorts of retaliatory arguments about government mandates, not just for vaccines, but for all sorts of things, K through 12 requirements, college education, all sorts of different things. So what I want to do is I want to let you guys talk a little bit about mandates and your thoughts on it, and then I will just casually sort of interject and play devil's advocate. And I may come in and just affirm your points as well. But the point of this segment is twofold. Number one, I want to talk about the mandates. But number two, I thought this would be a really good opportunity to teach people a little bit about argumentation. Because one of the things that has given me a pet peeve about this is I have learned through this discussion more than ever that people do not actually understand how to argue. They don't understand what syllogisms are, and they don't understand what the actual term logic and reason are. They don't understand how you draw two conclusions, or you draw, 2 points to a conclusion, and a rational, and the difference between when something's rational and when something is sound. There's a lot of people out there who have no fuck idea what I'm even talking about. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to introduce argumentation to the topic, because then you, as a listener and as somebody who may be discussing this in your own time, will have some tools to root out bad arguments, bad faith arguments, arguments that sound great but are not actually substantial. You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm going to turn it over to Spittin'. And Spittin' has been very enthusiastic about this mandate conversation. So we'll start with him. And Yeti, you jump in whenever you feel like it. And I'll sort of sit back, and I want to see how this goes.
Go.
All right. So as far as the vaccine mandate is concerned,
Yes.
you can't, you can't take this thing that has only a small window of time in existence, and as the months go past, the efficacy lowers drastically. And like, for instance, now only 20% of vaccines in the UK are Pfizer. They use mostly AstraZeneca. But as of August the 6th, 35% of all COVID hospitalizations were of fully vaxxed people. Okay, you can't take these things and like put people in a line and say, I know you don't want to do it. You should have taken your free chance at a lottery when we were doing that shit, or when we were handing out free fucking McGriddles in the McDonald's parking lot. You should have just done it then, whenever we told you that you had a choice, but you knew deep down that you really didn't. Now take your fucking medicine and like it. You can't do that to people. The reason why people aren't doing it is not, it's because they don't trust the fucking government. Now, whenever all these leftists online will get into arguments with me about, what are you, a Trumper because you won't take the vaccine, which is just
that's an ad hominem.
We've said it before. What a lazy fucking argument, yeah. And they have it with everything.
I want to come in here because we're talking about a little bit about argumentation. That is called ad hominem. Being a Trump supporter is completely irrelevant to whether or not you believe the vaccine is effective or not. There are plenty of people out there who are conservatives that think the vaccine is perfectly good. Going after somebody for a personal opinion or a personal fact about them as a result of their argument is not a valid argument. It is an ad hominem.
Okay. So then when I throw it out to them that, okay, 90% of African Americans identify as Democrat. Okay. And then, I said that wrong. It's not 90% of all African Americans, but 90% of registered voters. Okay?
Yeah. Very important distinction.
Yes, they identify as Democrats. 10% of them identify as Republicans. Okay, but then when you throw it out to them that only 28% of the African American community has taken the vaccine, so are you telling me that all of a sudden all those black people are now Trump supporters? And they have no legit argument to that. They just say that they're stupid or ill-informed. And it's like, no, they are well-informed. They have no reason. We are
Tuskegee happened.
We're not even 200 years removed from thinking it was okay to own black people.
That's a fair point. Okay? Yeah.
And so, give them some space and let them figure it out for themselves. If they don't want to take the fucking thing, you can't just put them in a line and stick a needle in their arm, man.
Now, I
Well,
want to.
that's
I
my
want to.
biggest.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
That's my biggest issue is if they mandate and they start either prison or start holding
Quarantine
back
camps. That's the
rights.
thing.
Yeah, they start holding back social services, any of stuff like that. You're disproportionately going to affect the black community again. I cannot see any justification anyone would think that's a good reason.
Okay.
Like we've
now,
seen the Tuskegee experiments.
Yeah, let me jump in real quick with
Yes,
that Tuskegee
please.
comment because I want to add on to that, and then I want to put forth my first devil's advocate position. So, if you don't know what Tuskegee was, you're doing yourself a disservice not looking it up. You really need to Google Tuskegee Airmen experiment, and you will find this information. But the long short of it was, correct me if I named the wrong disease here, because I'm very well might. There's a lot of them out there. They were intentionally infecting the Tuskegee Airmen with syphilis to study the long-term effects on the body and brain. They told them that they were giving them something else, like a vaccine of sorts. And what they actually did was they gave them syphilis.
Yeah.
Mhm.
These were World War II airmen heroes, people who were dogfighters in World War II, fighting off Hitler's Germany and the Nazis and the Axis powers, and they infected them with syphilis like guinea pigs. This is not a conspiracy. This actually happened, and they
then
did
on
it.
top of that,
Yeah.
Sorry, were you going to talk about the medication after?
Well, no, but I was actually going to jump to another example of when this happened, where they actually introduced another group of soldiers, largely minority, to mustard gas to do the same thing, to teach them to study the effects of mustard gas long term on the body. That study included death and insanity as a result of the introduction to the gas. And it wasn't until the Clinton administration that they actually sort of briefly, mildly got on television and sort of apologized for it. But it was so half-assed that it wasn't even, like people who were part of that don't even acknowledge it. So
Yeah, I believe they also gave half of them an actual like medication, and then half just like a placebo to see what would happen.
Now, one more thing I want to talk about, and I actually sent this to you guys a couple of days ago. I did not know about it until I read it and sent it to you guys, and both of you acknowledged that you didn't know about it either. But there's a legitimate history about vaccine skepticism in other countries, particularly one in Pakistan. And the reason is because our CIA, our Central Intelligence Agency, created a fake hepatitis B vaccine program in Pakistan, which actually served as a DNA collection tool to collect DNA to compare it to family members of Osama bin Laden to try to track him down. Our CIA created a fake vaccine program to collect DNA on people to trap and try to track down Osama bin Laden. Now, I want to make this clear. I am not suggesting that that is what's happening here. But I am going to link this article and the information on this from the 2010 CIA fake vaccine program because I think it's important, especially right now, for people to read about it so that they understand it is not on principle crazy to be skeptical about vaccines.
Yeah, like Swerve said, or Swerve, sorry, like Spittin says, and I also, we're pretty big into conspiracies. So we've been reading about this stuff for a long time. I tell people that I'm more of a history nerd that just happens to pay attention enough, and I've seen it over and over. And like, this is a perfect example. This is not a distant past. This is relatively
11 years ago, the CIA thing.
Yeah. Like, this is close where they've done this thing before.
Now, as for my devil's advocate argument, my first one for this.
Yep.
There may be a legal precedent already established for vaccine mandates. We require several vaccines for children to go to public school. We acknowledge that it is good for these children to get these vaccines to go to public school. And public schools have the right to refuse students who don't get the polio vaccine, the smallpox vaccine, the measles vaccine, the chickenpox vaccine, because we as a society know that not getting your children vaccinated for those diseases results in not only their reintroduction to society, but in some cases, their mass spreading in a very short amount of time. So if we have the legal precedent to require vaccines for children to go to public school, which by proxy vaccinates adults later in life, why would we not have the legal precedent to mandate a COVID vaccine now?
Because this one has not been put through the rigorous testing. A, B, I don't know the efficacy on the polio or the measles, but I know it's high. But I just was researching smallpox vaccine, and I know that it has a 99.7% efficacy.
So
I mean,
are we and this is still devil's advocate. Are we suggesting that a certain level of scientific information trumps the bodily autonomy at that point? Are we saying that because we know these vaccines are significantly well off, that a 99.7% success rate, for example, means that this virus is basically eradicated? Are we then okay with the science mandating the vaccine onto people?
well, I mean,
I'm still not. And for the
you're
reason
saying on
is,
this one?
well,
Are you
I don't
saying
like
on this one it's worse?
mandates.
I think Yeti's saying he's just not in favor of mandates, period.
Yeah,
Oh,
I don't think we should. I think the government should do a well enough job that trust is built into the system. I don't think just because they do such a shitty job, they should also be allowed to mandate it.
So in
It's like,
response, may I? I don't want to cut you off, but may I?
no, go ahead.
So in response to that, this is devil's advocate.
Yeah.
In response to that, okay, if we're going to build a system on trust, do we agree that there are people out there who, no matter what the government does, will not trust it?
Yeah, I think there is
Yeah.
people. But I think if we get a high enough ratio that people are willing to do this stuff, the few lingering people won't be as effective towards any of us.
So herd
right?
immunity is what you're talking about.
Yeah, essentially, that's what you're gonna. Oh, well, that's essentially what you need, regardless.
Right. So
that's what you're gonna work to, right?
Let me propose a hypothetical. Okay, we have here a parent who is an anti-vaxxer in your government trust system, where the government has been so transparent and so honest with us that we don't question the science behind the vaccines. But this person, because they are who I described as a person that no matter what will never trust the government, they are denying themselves and their child vaccine. Their child has a strong autoimmune disease that has destroyed their body's ability to defend itself, that will leave this child susceptible to everything that you can imagine. But we have a vaccine that can restore, and I don't even know if this is possible, but just run with me, that we have a vaccine that can restore a lot of the damage done to their autoimmune system. Okay. It'll eliminate the virus that's in them that's killing their autoimmune system. Their parent still will not vaccinate their child. Does the government of that country have a responsibility to protect that child?
How old of the kid are we talking? Like, can we ask the kid what they think?
Well, but see, here in the United States right now, we don't allow children to make their own medical decisions, right? You have to have a legal guardian or a parent make the decision on your behalf. So if your child, that's why anti-vax is a problem with the adult community, because what it really boils down to is people could care less largely what adults do with themselves, but they do care about what adults do to children, because a lot of people have children of their own and they don't want their children around kids who are super spreaders, right? So in this context that I'm talking about, does the government, that this fictional government that we're creating, have a responsibility to protect that child from that irresponsible parent?
I mean, if the it's hard for me to wrap my head around it, because I live in a government in a society that where the government doesn't supply their people with health care.
Right, I agree with that completely.
It's hard for me to imagine you know, that's my argument towards people that use Joe Biden's talking points, saying like, we care about you, just go get the shot, it's safe. And
Well,
it's like,
yeah.
if you cared about me, you give me health care.
And I agree with that
I'd like
point.
to make one caveat on my opinion.
Okay.
I forgot what my caveat was.
Well, when you think about it, just interrupt me. So,
Well, now I also wanted to say about Yeti's point about
okay.
the interrupting the social services.
Yeah.
Okay, we've just done that by Biden making it a federal mandate that if any nursing homes that rely on Medicare, Medicaid funding, that in order for them to keep getting funded, all employees have to be vaccinated. Okay. Now I get into arguments with people saying, well, wouldn't you want the people to be vaccinated so the old people wouldn't get sick and die? You're a monster. How dare you? And it's like, look, I'm just saying that you, first of all, man, you can't, like, if your grandma is in a nursing home and you've got the government dangling a carrot over her head, but she has nothing to do with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, she can't ever
Yes.
catch that carrot because look, she's in that home, she's in that facility, she is relying on the Medicare that she was promised would take care of her.
Yes.
And now all of a sudden our government is saying you can't have the care anymore because Steve the janitor doesn't want to get the vaccine. And okay, so then people will say, well, then you fire Steve the janitor and you get Bob the janitor to come in who did take the vaccine. Okay, that fine, whatever. But here's my other argument about it. The highest percentage of elderly people in that in long-term facility care is in Florida, Texas, and Arizona, all Republican states. Now, those nursing facilities also get state funding. So now these Republican governors have made it illegal to do vaccine mandates, correct?
I believe so. Yes. I don't know
They
for
have.
sure.
Oh, they have. Like
Okay.
the Arizona governor just made it a rule that you can't have you can't wear masks in school or
Yeah.
whatever.
Now, I do know for a fact that about 9 states in the United States have enacted about 11 different probation laws about mandatory vaccines, and I know that Arizona and Arkansas are 2 of them.
Okay,
But-
so in Florida, now I'm just using those 3 states for an example because they have the highest percentage of elderly people in long-term
Right.
facilities.
Right.
Okay, so now you've got the federal government saying all of the employees have to have vaccines, and you've got the state in Abbott and DeSantis and I think Ducey his name is. You've got them saying no, it is unconstitutional to have vaccine mandates. Now what do? Because those facilities, yes, they do, a bulk of their money is coming from Medicare, but they also have state funding for their food and their rent and their electricity and all that shit, right? So I've yet to have anybody tell me how that problem is going to be solved, where the federal government says you have to do this or we pull your Medicare funding, and the states are saying you don't have to do this, and if you do uh, uh, make it mandatory, then we are pulling your state funding. Like, how is this helpful to anybody?
I want
And that
to.
is another one of my arguments about the mandates.
I want to circle back for the sake of argumentation to the point you made about. You're hesitant because you exist in a government where the United States won't give you health care as it is, right?
Yeah.
You're skeptical of the argument that does a government have a right to protect a child, or does a responsibility to protect a child when they won't protect anybody else? I agree with that point, but I think to an extent there's also an element of whataboutism there, because if we're talking in the abstract, if we're just talking about ideals, then it's irrelevant. The status of the U.S. government and its desire to give healthcare is irrelevant to the point that we're making. But in reality, yes, I agree. I think the United States does a terrible job of actually administering people health care. And the fact that the COVID vaccine is largely free to everybody is an indicator that everything would be socialized and have a single payer system. And I think it's no longer crazy to argue that, as it has been demonstrated to be possible. Now, with that being said, the reason I think there's an element of what about there is because if we're looking at it purely from the abstract, the argument is, does a government have a responsibility to protect a child from an irrational parent? And the response to that is, well, the government doesn't protect anybody about anything anyway. Whether it does and whether it should are not the same question, right? So if we go back to the question, does a government have a responsibility to protect children from irresponsible parents? That's the sort of, I want to make a point, and I want to see what you guys think about that question. Does a government have a responsibility to protect children from irresponsible parents?
I mean,
in the ideal, try to take the blank, like the jadedness
well, when
that
you
we have
say
for the
it,
United
when you
States
say it, I
government.
put myself when you say it, I put myself in I'm the irresponsible parent. Okay.
Right.
And you know, I don't own any guns, so I'm not like, you come over my dead body and I'll shoot you. I'm not like, so I'm just like, uh, you know, it wouldn't stop the government from taking your kid away from you.
Right. And
If
I mean, I still think that's a separate
is,
argument, though. You know what I'm saying?
well, I'm just saying, if that's the criteria,
right.
If that's what you're laying out to me, if I'm the irresponsible parent that won't get my kid because of this, that, or whatever, and they say, well, look, we're deeming you unfit. We can have you admitted to a psych ward. We can take your kid from your care and place them in foster care, where God knows what's going to happen to them. But
Right.
at least these people are going to let us poke them and prod them with whatever we want, because they're ours now. They're
Right.
awarded faith.
But I guess
if you lay it to me down like that, then I mean, yeah,
well,
I guess
flip your perspective and put yourself in the seat of the, like, let's say this fictional government has a president, right? Like, let's say it's comparable to the United States system, and now you're the president. Do you have a responsibility? And not even just considering vaccines. Think about like hard religious parents who won't take their kids to the doctor and try to pray for them, right? Think about parents who are genuinely neglectful, where they won't feed their kids, or they won't bathe their kids, or they, in some cases that I've actually seen where they chain them up outside, right? Think about it from a grander perspective than just vaccines, and think about the head of this government. Do you have a responsibility to protect children from irresponsible parents?
I mean, in that case, in that circumstance, yes.
So then, could you see an argument being made? Let's not make it Joe Biden, because that's way too complicated. Let's take like an average person like you, who has good intentions, who has good thoughts, who genuinely cares about people, right? Who wants to make society a better place, who's not influenced by money or lobbying or any of this stuff, right? Like, that's a pretty fair assessment of you, right?
Sure.
Right. So let's make you this person now. You are in a situation where there's a fictional parent with a fictional child who has a disease that is destroying their autoimmune system, and we have a good, high efficacy, well-researched, documented vaccine to cure that virus in that child, and that parent doesn't trust your administration and doesn't want to give their child that vaccine despite all of the better information we have out there. Do you have a responsibility to vaccinate that child as a government?
That's tough, man.
And that's why I bring it up, because this is a tough conversation. In that situation, that I've proposed, that there is a virus that destroys autoimmune systems, that you have a well-documented, well-studied vaccine for that virus, that parent is choosing based on whatever information they have to not vaccinate that child, and they are going to try to introduce that child to the public. It is very difficult to make that decision. It is less difficult to make that decision in the COVID situation because the vaccine has a far lower efficacy rate. It is, by all metrics, still experimental in process. There are changes coming to whether or not we're going to do a booster or not do a booster all the time. The experts that are on television are suspect. So it becomes much easier to say, no, we should not be mandating this in that situation. And I want to stress that I'm doing this devil's advocate thing, that I am largely not a fan of mandates either. But I recognize that there's a humongous gray area when you mix together high levels of scientific information, public interest, and government responsibility. Now, I am in no way advocating that the United States is a responsible government when it comes to people's health. I think we have seen that on the forefront over the last 2 years, that the United States government really has no fucking idea what it's doing. And if it does, it's largely rooted in a place of profit and malice, not well-being, right?
And politicization.
Yes, very, very much politicization as well. So I think it becomes a much grayer issue than just yes or no. Should we mandate? Should we not mandate? As you can see by my hypothetical example. Now, yes, it is a hypothetical. It only serves to prove an idealistic point. It does not demonstrate anything in the real world. But between the fact that we already have mandates for public schools and public space for a bunch of other higher tested vaccines that are more like what I'm describing, like polio, like smallpox, like chickenpox et al., and we already are okay with the status of, if your child does not get these vaccines, they do not go to public school. They have to go to private school or be homeschooled or some other method. In the context that, let's say, in the next year or two, a vaccine is introduced for COVID with a high efficacy, with a high level of intelligence and scientific testing and peer-reviewed, all this other stuff. Okay, it's a very good vaccine. And it does not eliminate COVID, but like I said earlier, it creates a significant enough reduction to where we can treat it like the common cold or the flu. If that hits the market, it's going to be harder to argue that children should not get that vaccine. And by proxy,
but sort of, it's we're talking about a vaccine right now that has you can't get unless you're 12 and over, and it's not FDA approved between 12 and 16.
And I agree completely with that, with this point. And again, I'm playing devil's advocate because I agree with you about the current COVID vaccine. I do not see a reason it should be mandated whatsoever. It is not very effective. It's low efficacy. It's not designed for children. So I agree with you completely. And I'm not advocating in the future that a mandate should exist. But we've already sort of created this weird legal precedent where we can limit your access to public space, right? We can limit a child's access to public school if they're not vaccinated. We can limit a child's access to certain locations if they're not given vaccines. So in the event that we create a better one, I can see people using that legal precedent to create a justification for a mandate that I personally probably wouldn't agree with. Because you know me, I talked about it in previous episodes. I'm a bodily autonomy guy. I believe you have a right to dictate what goes into your body and what doesn't go into your body. But we also have to deal with the reality that children have their medical decisions made by their parents, and that not all parents are created equal. By a large margin, not all parents are created equal. So the question becomes, does the government, this is the overall point that I was making, and I think we're all going to fall on the same side of this. And this is, I led us down this rabbit hole because I wanted to get to the next sentence that I'm about to say, because it's what I think is the real crux of this argument. Do we as a society we have to make a decision. Do we put our trust and our safety and our concerns about viruses and pandemics and overall medical well-being in the hands of a government body, or do we as a society take it upon ourselves to self-regulate, to choose consciously to be vaccinated, to choose consciously to seek out medical decision, to choose consciously to seek out our own personal well-being for health? Because those answers have very different consequences. If we put it in the hands of the government, then that means we have to submit to mandates and requirements for public space and requirements for jobs and employment. And if we take it upon ourselves, that means we have to take it upon ourselves to acquire the best possible information, make informed decisions, be responsible parents, and not fall susceptible to bad faith conspiracy arguments or bad faith argumenters or public pressure. We have to be in an honest situation. And I would pick the social myself. I would pick the social responsibility that we as a society need to be smart enough to make good decisions for ourselves. And I think that requires a lot of introspection, because I think there's a great lyric in a song by the band Nothing More. The song, the lyric goes, everybody wants to change the world. Nobody wants to change themselves, right? Everybody wants to come up with these grandiose solutions to these problems, but nobody's ready to deal with it. Like, we all talk about green energy, getting off of fossil fuels, separating ourselves from a government-dependent electronic grid, but people aren't ready to admit that that means you're going to sacrifice technology like smartphones and high-end computers and Xboxes, that you're going to have less television, that you might need to change your car in the next couple of years, that it's going to come with a humongous quality of life change. And that's not something people are ready to talk about, because they want to change the world, but they don't want to change themselves, right?
Yeah.
So I am with you guys. I oppose a mandate in this larger, broader context and in this specific COVID context. I don't like that being a government decision. But we are in a group of people that is prepared to argue in favor of Medicare for all. I completely support a single-payer system for the benefit of the people. But we're going to have a conversation about, does single payer, if the government is the single payer, does that mean they have a right to decide what they're paying for, right? Does that mean if the government is funding healthcare, if it's a federally funded universal healthcare system, and they're the payers, do they have a right to decide what's going into that system? That's a conversation we're going to have.
No, because up here, the hospitals can't turn you away. Like,
and I'm not talking about being turned away. I'm talking about when we get into these situations that are experimental and unpredictable. You know, if the government, like a COVID vaccine, if the government is paying for the COVID vaccine, do they have a right to decide what they're paying for? And I don't think they do. I think I'm with you, Yeti, that their responsibility is to pay for it, not to dictate it or legislate it, other than, base level stuff and the administrative stuff. But
yeah, they should be just there to essentially do the paperwork, push it through, and then let the doctors decide on.
And yes, and I agree with that perspective. So that's the point that I wanted to, when it came to this mandate conversation, I wanted to come specifically here, because I think this is the real, true dividing line between the authoritarian take and the sort of social take. You know what I mean? I think people who want to default to the government and just mandate it and say, you have to get this, no questions, no thoughts, no independence on the issue, I think that's a very unhealthy, authoritarian take on the situation, because you're putting a lot of faith into this government doing the right thing for you when you have no evidence of that being the case long term. The government has unanimously tried to fuck over everybody it could at any opportunity for any amount of money at any time.
And can I
of course,
throw in a couple of quotes here?
Of course, sir.
Okay. Now on December the 4th, a BBC article. Okay, December the 4th. So Joe Biden had been elected president, but he hadn't been inaugurated yet. Joe Biden says a COVID vaccine, if and when available, will not be mandatory.
Right.
Okay. Now, That's all I took from that article. Okay, that's just like the headline. But this is I'm using these Fauci quotes because it seems like everybody trusts him more than they trust Biden.
Which is
And,
strange.
and I mean, the guy's track record is just as shady as Biden's. And
if you don't believe that, if you don't believe what he just said about his track record, I want you to go look up quotes from Fauci on Ebola back in 2014.
Or AIDS.
Yes, that too.
Okay, so now this quote was from Fauci in August of last year. So a year ago this month, okay?
Yes.
He says, I don't think you'll ever see a mandatory of the vaccine, particularly for the general public. Now he said this during a town hall. He also says, if someone refuses, there's nothing you can do about that. You cannot force someone to take a vaccine.
Right.
Now, okay, those are his words a year ago.
Right.
Now, this was from earlier this month. I know people must like their individual freedom and not be told to do something, but we are in such a serious situation now that mandates should be done. Now, when
That's the
your
same guy.
government, that's the same guy, and when your government waffles that much, just like this is the same dude that, I mean, whether people like to hear it or not, he told you not to wear a mask, and he laughed at the notion that it could do anything to prevent an airborne virus.
Right.
Okay. Now we can argue whether he said that to protect the fucking N95 masks or whatever he came out and said later on. I mean, this is also a guy that he says, hey, we're going in the right direction. Then the CDC says, take your masks off. And then a month later, Fauci says, that was a bad idea. They should have never said, take the masks off. We're going in the wrong direction. And now today he came on MSNBC and he says, with the FDA approval, we're going in the right direction. And It's like, this guy is a fucking teeter-totter, man.
And it makes you wonder where his last big donation came from.
Or not just that. A lot of people don't know this. He is the highest paid government official in the United States. He makes more a year than the president. A lot of people don't know that. And we're talking about a guy that has served under every president since Reagan.
Yep.
And just remember whenever he first went on Maddow right after Biden got inaugurated, and Maddow's like, hey, it's your first time coming to see me, and Fauci's like, well, I always tried to come on here, and they'd always ask, why do you want to go on Rachel Maddow? And I'd say, because she's great, and she tells the truth. And it's like, this guy throws people under the bus, no problem. But if you try and come at him about any of the shit I just mentioned,
yeah,
he loses his shit, man. I mean, like if you ever watch him in defense mode, it is scary, man. He is a day and night different person.
Right.
Like the guy that Brad Pitt is impersonating on Saturday Night Live, and the guy that's going out throwing the baseball at the Washington Nationals game. You got that guy, but then if you come at him about any of his quotes, shit that he has said all within a year's time, that always contradicts himself, talking in circles. If you come at him with any of that, he automatically just writes you off as being bad faith, and he'll completely dismiss it.
Right.
He'll be like, oh, well, you want to bring that up? Like, yeah, so what? I told people not to wear masks, but now I'm saying they're good, so now they're good, and it's like, you can't do that, bro.
Yeah.
Because the guy that was interviewing him on 60 Minutes said, "Are you sure?" And he says, "Yes, I'm sure." And he said, "You're telling people they don't have to wear masks?" And he's like, not in a pandemic. It's going to maybe block a couple little spittles. If that makes you feel good, so be it. But it's not going to cause you from not getting sick. He said it, and you know, like, look, I've committed crimes and I've got felonies because of it. And I don't go around, if to prospective employers saying, uh, yeah, but that was a different time, like the judge already ruled on that. But if it was a different judge, he would have saw it differently.
Yeah.
I got to own my fucking mistakes. This
Yeah.
guy is a 100 millionaire that hangs out at Sun Valley with fucking Bill Gates and Elon Musk and shit.
Probably knew Jeffrey Epstein to some level.
Yeah,
Reckless speculation, but I mean, is it really?
But yeah, so I wanted to end my stuff on with those quotes because because I remembered Fauci saying that you couldn't mandate people to take this vaccine.
Right, and now he's saying you can.
And I wanted, and I when I looked it up and it was right there, I almost skipped past it because it said August, and I was thinking, because everything that was showing me was August 2021,
Right.
everything, and it's like Fauci says we may have to mandate and blah blah blah. You know how Google is, man.
Oh,
They
yeah, of
throw
course.
all this
Most
shit.
recent, most highest paid, yeah.
Yeah, and then finally I see something and I almost skip past it because it says August, and then I noticed that it says 2020, and I'm like, there it is. And how fucking crazy is it that it's exactly a year?
Mhm. Yeah,
Like you
like on time almost.
a year ago, you tell us that you cannot mandate, you can't force people to take this vaccine, and now,
You are.
like I said, let me leave it one more time. I know people must like their individual freedom and not to be told to do something, but we are in such a serious situation now that mandates should be done. And it's like, I know people may like freedom. It's just the same as when fucking Obama got caught with the NSA shit.
Yep.
And he finally had to own up to it. And instead of taking any of the blame and saying, my bad, fuck, man, I betrayed your guys' trust. What can I do to make up for it? Instead of that, he comes out and he pretty much blames us. He says, you guys don't want to get invaded by terrorists. I'm just trying to protect you. You've got to give up some of your personal freedom in order to be protected. Like talking to us like we're fucking infants. And it's these people, man, these sick sociopaths that got the shit wrong with them. And when they get caught red-handed, it's just like, well, you're expecting to hold me to something I said a year ago? Well, a lot of shit's changed. The virus has evolved, and now we do have to make people take it. Fucking bullshit. That's all I got to say.
There's a great quote out there about, and I believe it's a founding father, but it still stands. Those who would trade freedom for security deserve neither. You guys have seen me put that out in the world many times.
Yeah.
So
is that Jefferson?
It's very probable. I'm not sure which one it is. And honestly, the founding fathers are kind of suspect, but that quote does ring true. It's one of those things where, like, if Hitler says the sky blue, it's not blue because Hitler said it. You know what I mean? So, like, but to finish this up, because we are really, really close to 2 hours, and I want to watch that because our podcast companies don't like that too much. But with that being said, I want to wrap up with one point. I played devil's advocate here for the sake of it. And the biggest, longest one that we went down was my argument about legal precedent, right?
Yeah.
Legal precedent is an argument that people in courthouses need to worry about because it's something where they talk about what has the government and the courts decided before, right? Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily something that should concern the average everyday person because legal precedent is just that. It is legalities. It is not moralities. And when I argue this stuff from a perspective of morality. Is it moral to enforce X on someone? Is it moral to infringe on somebody's bodily autonomy? And the answers are not always consistent, but it's always my root base because at the end of the day, I'm a satanic humanist. I think that, while I protect myself above all of the things, I believe that human well-being is a mutually beneficial situation, and it is something that we should all strive to aid and accommodate because we will all be better off for it. So
we'd be living like the Jetsons if we got along.
Oh yeah. Don't walk around using my legal precedent devil's advocate argument to try to justify a vaccine mandate, because that's really not what the point of it was. The point of it was to point out this, which is that legal precedent is not morality. And the two, what's legal and what's moral, have nothing to do with one another. There are all sorts of things in the United States that are legal that are immoral. Like, for example, cheating on your spouse. Not really a good thing to do, but it's not criminal, is it?
Yeah.
Flip side, smoking weed, completely harmless, a self-assessing situation. You are choosing to put something into yourself that affects nobody else around you. Illegal. So,
Not in Canada, suckers.
yeah, right? Prostitution. Nothing really wrong with paying somebody to have sex with you unless your other intentions are ill. But on principle, the idea, really not that immoral. Really no big problem there. That's a crime. So, what is legal and what is moral are two very different things, and they need to be considered as such. And I wanted to make that point because lately I have seen a lot of people conflate the two, which couldn't be a bigger fucking mistake. Because the United States government would tell you whatever is legal is what is moral, and that is the quickest way to be turned into a yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, Mr. President, yes, Mr. President.
Yes, man.
Exactly. With that being said, I think this might have been our most interesting episode to date, but that is my subjective opinion. I think there are people who might still pick episode 3, but this one was pretty damn good. And I want to thank everybody who listens to it, and I want to thank the two of you for being part of it and enjoying this sort of discussion together. I thought it was very fun and productive.
I enjoyed it.
Yes, definitely. So, and I hope you did too, Spittin'.
Loved it.
With that being said, you can check out this and other episodes all over the place. We are on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and we are getting set up. I'm working on it right now to do these live in the future, so keep your eyes on that. But I want to thank, once again, I just want to thank everybody who tunes in, anybody who shares us around, who follows us on Twitter, who promotes our show, who sends clips of us around the internet and whatnot. I want to thank everybody who participates in that. From all of us here at Elite City Media and at Difficult Realities, I am Swerve. Thank you so much for being here for this journey, and we'll see you next time on another episode of Difficult Realities. Everybody take it easy and try not to stress out too much through this whole thing. We'll see you soon.
Cheers.